The clock struck midnight, and the ballroom erupted in a cacophony of cheers and popping corks, confetti raining down like fleeting dreams over the sea of glittering dresses and tailored suits. But in the shadowed corner near the fogged-up windows, Olivia stood alone, her champagne flute untouched, the weight of the evening pressing on her like an uninvited guest. She had come to this lavish New Year's gala in the heart of the city, hoping foolishly that the sparkle might chase away the shadows of her fractured life. But now, as couples swayed to the band's swelling melody, she felt more isolated than ever. Whispers from a cluster of sharply dressed men nearby grew bolder, their eyes lingering too long, their laughter laced with intent. One stepped forward, his cologne sharp and overpowering, murmuring something about joining them for the countdown. Olivia's heart raced, her fingers tightening around the stem of her glass. She wasn't naive to the undercurrent of entitlement in rooms like this, but tonight, with the year's end looming, it felt like the final unraveling of her resolve. The heavy oak doors at the far end of the room swung open with a gust of winter chill, cutting through the warmth like a blade. In strode a figure who seemed carved from the night itself, a broad-shouldered man in weathered leather, his boots thudding against the polished marble floor, drawing stares from the crowd like moths to a flame. Ethan Hawk Harlan, a biker whose road-worn jacket bore the faded emblem of the Iron Promise crew, had no business being here. He'd ridden into town on a whim, chasing the ghost of a promise made decades ago under desert stars, but the gala's invitation, slipped to him by an old contact, had pulled him in like a riptide. His greying beard framed a face etched with lines from battles unseen, and his eyes, sharp as polished steel, scanned the room with quiet vigilance. He wasn't here for the champagne or the false merriment. He was here because promises didn't die with time, and tonight felt like the universe testing his. Ethan's gaze locked on Olivia, just as the man in the suit leaned closer, his hand brushing her arm. She flinched, stepping back, but the crowd's press left her cornered. Without a word, Ethan moved, his stride purposeful, parting the revelers like a ship through fog. The air around him carried the faint scent of engine oil and rain-soaked leather, a stark contrast to the floral perfumes enveloping the room. He reached her side in seconds, his presence a wall against the encroaching threat. "Pretend you're with me," he said, his voice low and gravelly, carrying the rumble of distant thunder. He slipped an arm around her waist, light but firm, turning her toward the dance floor as if they'd arrived together. The men hesitated, their smirks fading under Ethan's unyielding stare, then muttered excuses and melted back into the throng. Olivia's breath caught, her body tense against his. But the simple act of his intervention sparked something, a flicker of safety in the chaos. "Who are you?" she whispered, her voice barely audible over the music, as they swayed awkwardly to the rhythm. Ethan's eyes softened, just a fraction, revealing the scars beneath his stoic facade. "Someone who knows what it's like to stand alone when the clock runs out," he replied. His words weighted with unspoken history. In that moment, as fireworks bloomed outside the windows in bursts of gold and crimson, Olivia felt the first crack in her armor. This stranger, with his calloused hands and haunted gaze, had extended a lifeline not just for the night, but perhaps for something deeper. A promise forged in the quiet spaces between heartbeats. As the song faded, Ethan guided her to a quieter alcove, the party's roar muffled by heavy drapes. He released her gently, respecting the invisible boundary she'd rebuilt in an instant. "You don't have to explain," he said, pulling a worn flask from his inner pocket and offering it. The liquid inside smelled of aged whiskey, warm against the chill seeping through the glass panes. Olivia shook her head, but her shoulders eased. For the first time that evening, she wasn't the overlooked widow carrying the grief of a lost partner and a family fractured by old betrayals. She was seen. Ethan leaned against the wall, his leather creaking softly. He hadn't planned on staying. His crew waited at the edge of town, engines idling like patient guardians, but something in her eyes mirrored the voids he'd spent years riding to outrun. Back in his youth, under the vast Nevada skies, he'd sworn an oath to a brother in arms: protect the innocent, honor the broken, no matter the cost. That promise had pulled him through wars, wrecks, and regrets, binding him to the iron promise, a family not of blood, but of unyielding loyalty. Tonight it called him to her. They talked in fragments, the conversation weaving through the party's distant laughter. Olivia spoke of her late husband, a firefighter who'd given everything in a blaze that claimed more than just his life, leaving her with debts, doubts, and a daughter questioning if strength was just another word for solitude. Ethan listened, his nods steady, sharing only glimpses of his own scars, a combat wound that ached in the cold, a crew that had become his anchor after his blood family shattered in a hail of bad choices and worse luck. "Promises keep us going when everything else fades," he said finally as the band struck up another tune. "Mine brought me here, yours. Well, maybe it's time to remember them." Outside, the city skyline glittered under a blanket of stars, the new year dawning with tentative light. Olivia glanced at the door, the weight of leaving alone lifting slightly. Ethan's offer hung between them, not a grand declaration, but a quiet vow. He'd see her to her car, ensure the night ended on her terms. As they stepped into the crisp air, the rumble of a lone motorcycle echoed from the street below, a reminder that roads led not just away, but toward redemption. In the hours that followed, as Olivia drove home through snow-dusted streets, Ethan's words lingered like the echo of an engine's roar. She didn't know it yet, but that chance encounter at midnight would unravel threads of corruption tied to her husband's death, a web of institutional betrayal that demanded justice. And Ethan, bound by his ancient oath, would ride at her side, his iron promise crew assembling like shadows in the dawn. What began as a pretense would forge an unbreakable bond, proving that in a world of hollow celebrations, true honor roared louder than any silence. The city lights blurred in her rear view, and for the first time in years, Olivia felt the stir of hope, a promise renewed, not broken. The first light of the new year crept over the horizon like a hesitant promise, painting the snow-kissed rooftops in soft hues of pink and gold. Olivia pulled into the driveway of her modest two-story home on the outskirts of the city, the engine of her old sedan ticking as it cooled in the frigid air. The house, once alive with her husband's laughter and their daughter's playful chaos, now stood quiet, its windows dark like unblinking eyes. She lingered in the car for a moment, her hand still gripping the wheel. The warmth of Ethan's arm around her waist, a phantom echo against her side. Who was he, really? A stranger who'd stepped from the shadows of a party she regretted attending, offering not pity, but partnership in pretense. Yet his words, "Promises keep us going," had burrowed into her like roots seeking soil. Inside, the house smelled of pine from the half-decorated tree in the corner, forgotten amid the holiday rush. Olivia shrugged off her coat, the sequins of her dress catching the faint glow from the street lamp outside. Her daughter, Mia, was with her aunt for the night, a small mercy that allowed Olivia this solitary unraveling. She poured a glass of water from the kitchen tap, the liquid cold and clear, and sank into the worn armchair by the fireplace. The embers had died hours ago, leaving only ash, much like the remnants of her life since the fire that took Daniel 5 years back. He'd been a hero, they said, a firefighter charging into the inferno at the old warehouse district to save trapped workers. But the official report, a tragic accident, faulty wiring, no survivors. Olivia had accepted it then, burying her grief with the urn on the mantel. Now, in the quiet dawn, doubts flickered like dying coals. whispers from old friends, unanswered questions about the insurance payout that never came, and lately, anonymous letters hinting at cover-ups in the department. She hadn't told anyone, not even Mia, now 12 and fierce with questions of her own. Her phone buzzed on the coffee table, startling her, an unknown number. Heart-pounding, she answered, her voice a whisper. "Hello? Olivia? It's Ethan. Hawk from the gala." His tone was steady, the gravel softened by the early hour, as if he'd been waiting for the right moment to call. She could picture him, boots propped on some motel dashboard, the city skyline fading behind him. "How did you—" She trailed off, glancing at the door as if he might appear. "Old habits. I saw you leave alone, wanted to make sure you got home safe." A pause, the faint crackle of the line carrying the distant hum of traffic. "And I couldn't shake what you said about your husband. Fires like that, they leave more than scars." She leaned forward, elbows on knees, the glass sweating in her palm. "It's nothing, just ghosts." But it wasn't nothing. The letters had started months ago. Typed notes slipped under her door, claiming Daniel's death was no accident, that bribes and corner-cutting in the fire department hid a bigger rot. She dismissed them as cranks, but tonight, with Ethan's intervention fresh in her mind, they felt like warnings. Ethan's voice pulled her back. "I've seen enough cover-ups in my time to know when something's off. My crew. We don't let that stand. Meet me tomorrow. Coffee shop on Elm Street. Noon. No strings. Just talk." She hesitated, the weight of isolation warring with the spark he'd ignited. "Why help? You don't know me." A low chuckle, warm as sun-baked leather. "Because I made a promise long ago, to stand for those who can't. And you remind me that some fights are worth riding into." The call ended, leaving the room emptier than before. Olivia rose, pacing to the window, where frost etched patterns like fractured vows. Outside, the neighborhood stirred. Neighbors shoveling driveways, headlights cutting through the mist. She thought of Daniel's badge tucked in a drawer upstairs, its shine dulled by time. He'd always said justice wasn't about laws, but about doing right when no one was looking. Maybe Ethan was right. Maybe it was time to look. By morning, the sun hung low, casting long shadows across the coffee shop's checkered floor. Olivia arrived early, her boots clicking on the tile, the aroma of fresh brew mingling with the tang of cinnamon rolls. She chose a corner booth, away from the chatter of locals nursing hangovers. Ethan was already there, his leather jacket draped over the seat, a black coffee steaming before him. He stood as she approached, his frame filling the space, but his nod was gentle, respectful. "You came," he said, sliding a menu her way. "Curiosity, and maybe more." She ordered tea, her fingers tracing the rim of the cup when it arrived. Steam curling like unspoken fears. Ethan leaned in, his eyes scanning the room out of habit before settling on her. He shared first, a tale from his past, sparse but vivid. A war buddy lost to a friendly fire incident swept under rugs by brass, too eager for clean reports. "I rode out after that, formed the Iron Promise with guys like me, vets, outcasts, all bound by one oath. No one gets left behind. We fix what the system breaks." Olivia's throat tightened. She pulled a folded letter from her purse, sliding it across the table. The words were stark. Daniel knew too much about the warehouse deal. They silenced him. "Check the logs, before they bury you too." Ethan read it slowly, his jaw setting like iron. "This is no prank. Dates match what I remember hearing. Shady contracts in the district, developers paying off inspectors." He folded it carefully, handing it back. "We dig, quietly. My crew can pull strings, talk to sources the badges won't touch." As they spoke, the shop's bell jingled with new patrons, but their booth felt like a fortress, words weaving a fragile alliance. Olivia described the fire, sirens wailing in the night, the acrid smoke that clung to her clothes for weeks, Mia's tiny hand in hers at the memorial. He was investigating something, overtime logs he wouldn't explain. Then, gone. Ethan's hand hovered near hers, not touching, but close enough to offer solidarity. "We'll start with the old station. I know a guy, retired captain with a grudge. But this could stir things up. You sure?" She met his gaze, the steel in his eyes mirroring her resolve. "For Daniel. For Mia. Yes." Outside, as they parted, Ethan to his bike parked curbside, Olivia to her car. The engine's roar followed her home, a steady pulse against the uncertainty. That afternoon, she retrieved Daniel's badge, polishing it until it gleamed, a silent vow forming. Little did she know Ethan's call to his crew would summon shadows from the road, brothers in arms, ready to ride not for glory, but for the quiet justice that mends broken promises. The day waned into twilight, the city humming with post-holiday life, but beneath it all, gears turned, corruption's web tightening, then fraying at the edges. Olivia locked her door, the letter burning in her mind. While miles away, Ethan throttled his bike toward the horizon, the iron promise igniting once more. And now I invite you to leave in the comments where you're watching from and the exact hour you heard this story. We wish to know how far these northern confessions travel and at what moments they reach you. The engine's low growl faded into the evening hush as Ethan pulled up to the weathered brick facade of the old fire station on the city's forgotten edge, where rusted hydrants stood like silent sentinels against the encroaching dusk. The building, once a beacon of hurried heroism, now squatted abandoned, its bays empty save for echoes of sirens long silenced. Graffiti scarred the walls in jagged strokes, but the iron doors still bore faint traces of the department's emblem, a shield etched with flames that never fully quenched. Olivia sat behind him on the bike, her arms tentatively looped around his waist, the vibration of the machine humming through her like a reluctant pulse. She'd hesitated at home, Mia's curious eyes watching from the kitchen window as she slipped on a heavier coat, but the pull of answers was stronger than fear. Ethan had called an hour ago. "The captain's waiting. Bring your fire." They dismounted, boots crunching on frost-laced gravel, the air sharp with the metallic tang of old rain and diesel residue. Ethan led the way, his silhouette cutting through the dim light spilling from a single bulb above the side entrance. He knocked twice, sharp, deliberate, before the door creaked open, revealing a man in his late 60s, broad but bowed by time, his flannel shirt stretched over a frame that spoke of battles with blazes and bureaucracy. Captain Elias Grant, retired but not resigned, eyed them with the wariness of someone who'd seen too many shadows lengthen. "Hawk," he grunted, stepping aside, "didn't think you'd drag civilians into this?" "She's not civilian," Ethan replied, his voice steady as he guided Olivia inside. The interior smelled of damp concrete and faded ink, fluorescent strips buzzing overhead like trapped insects. Files cluttered a metal desk in what had been the dispatch room, yellowed maps pinned to boards showing the warehouse district's labyrinth of streets. Elias poured 3 mugs of coffee from a percolator that looked older than the station itself, the steam rising in lazy curls that carried notes of bitterness and burnt grounds. Olivia accepted hers, the warmth seeping through the ceramic to her chilled fingers. She felt the weight of their gazes, Elias's skeptical, Ethan's supportive, and cleared her throat. "Daniel was my husband. He died here, 5 years back. The fire at the Apex warehouse. I have reason to believe it wasn't clean." She slid the latest letter across the desk, its edges worn from her readings. Elias scanned it, his bushy brows knitting, a low rumble building in his chest like distant thunder. "Damn fools," he muttered, tossing it down. "Daniel was one of the good ones. Nose for trouble. heart for the fight. He came to me weeks before, whispering about inspections fudged, developers greasing palms to skip safety checks, said the warehouse was a powder keg waiting for a match, but the chief shut him down. Budget cuts, they called it. Next thing, he's ash. Elias's eyes, faded blue but fierce, met Olivia's. I buried my reports after that. Brass made it clear, dig too deep and you're out, or worse. Ethan leaned against a filing cabinet, arms crossed, the leather of his jacket whispering with the motion. We need those logs. Anything on the Apex contracts, overtime shifts. My crew's got eyes on the current department. Quiet tales, no badges alerted. He didn't elaborate, but Olivia could sense the web he spun. The iron promise, a brotherhood forged in the crucible of forgotten wars, their loyalty a chain stronger than any official oath. They'd lost brothers to similar silences, vets silenced by red tape, families left in the dark, and Ethan carried that vow like a tattoo on his soul. Elias hesitated, glancing at the door as if expecting intruders, then shuffled to a locked drawer. The key rattled in the tumbler, and he pulled out a battered ledger, its pages brittle as autumn leaves. This is what I kept, Daniel's notes scribbled in the margins. See here. He tapped an entry dated just before the fire. A shipment log for industrial chemicals, signed off by an inspector named Harlan. Wait, no, Harlan was Ethan's surname. But this was Victor Harlan, a ghost from Ethan's past. Ethan's jaw tightened, a flicker of recognition crossing his face like a shadow. Vic? My uncle. He was department back then, before the bottle took him. Olivia's breath hitched, the pieces slotting with an audible click in her mind. He signed off on the safety, but the letter said, "Corruption runs deep," Elias cut in, his voice gravel over stone. Vic was pressured, debts, threats. Developers wanted that site cleared fast for condos, no questions. Daniel confronted him, I think. That's why the fire spread so quick, doors chained, exits blocked. He flipped pages, revealing sketches Daniel had drawn, weak points in the structure, circled warnings about overloaded wiring. The air grew thicker, charged with the ghosts of what-ifs, the faint drip of a leaky pipe underscoring the silence. Outside, a car engine purred too close, headlights sweeping the gravel like searching fingers. Ethan straightened, hand instinctively brushing his belt where no weapon lay. His fight was never about force, but fortitude. We move this, copy what we can, get it to the crew. Elias nodded, pulling a small copier from under the desk, its whir filling the room like a conspirator's whisper. As pages spat out, Olivia traced Daniel's handwriting, the loops and lines a lifeline from the grave. Tears pricked her eyes, not of sorrow but fury. A quiet blaze kindling in her chest, for Mia, who'd grown up fatherless, reciting stories of a hero without the full truth. For the workers lost in that inferno, their names reduced to footnotes. They worked swiftly, the clock ticking toward nightfall, shadows lengthening across the floorboards. Ethan shared fragments of his own tie. Victor's fall had splintered his family, sending a young Ethan to the roads, vowing never to let silence claim another. "Promises aren't paper," he said softly to Olivia as they bundled the copies. "They're the ride you take when the path gets rough." She nodded, the ledger's weight in her arms, a tangible vow, binding her to this unlikely alliance. Elias saw them out, his parting words a gruff benediction. "Watch your backs. The rot's still there, Chief's office, City Hall. They don't like loose ends." The door thudded shut behind them, locking with finality. Ethan fired up the bike, Olivia climbing on with newfound steadiness, the engine's roar drowning the night's subtle threats. They rode into the cooling dark, streetlights blurring into streaks of amber, the copied pages tucked safe in Ethan's saddlebag. Miles away, in a dimly lit garage on the city's fringe, Ethan's phone buzzed. A text from his second Jax, a wiry vet with a scar across his knuckles. "Crew's assembling. Got a lead on the inspector's old haunt. Ride safe." The iron promise stirred, engines warming like hearts rekindling old fires. But as they crested a hill overlooking the twinkling sprawl, Olivia spotted a black sedan in the rearview mirror of Ethan's side mirror, tail lights too steady, too purposeful. Paranoia or pursuit? The road ahead curved into uncertainty, but for the first time she wasn't riding alone. The wind whipped her hair, carrying the scent of pine and promise as the new alliance forged ahead, one quiet turn at a time toward the truth that could redeem them all. The black sedan lingered in the shadows of the overpass, its headlights dimmed like watchful eyes as Ethan throttled the bike harder, the engine snarl cutting through the night like a defiant challenge. Olivia clung tighter, her cheek pressed against the worn leather of his back, the chill wind slicing past them in icy gusts that carried the faint, acrid bite of exhaust from the city below. Street lamps flickered overhead, casting elongated shadows that danced across the asphalt like fleeting accusations. She glanced back, heart hammering in rhythm with the pistons. Yes, it was following, weaving through sparse traffic with calculated patience. Not paranoia, pursuit. The copies of the ledger burned in her mind, their secrets now a beacon drawing unseen hunters. Ethan didn't accelerate recklessly. His rides were always measured, a lesson learned from roads that forgave no mistakes. He veered onto a narrower side street, the bike leaning into the curve with a precision born of countless miles, tires humming against the frost-kissed pavement. The sedan hesitated at the turn, then followed, its engine a low growl echoing their own. "Hold on," Ethan murmured over his shoulder, his voice steady amid the roar, pulling into the lot of a run-down diner on the fringe of town, neon sign buzzing "Open 24/7" in faded red, steam fogging the windows from late-night patrons seeking solace in greasy plates and bottomless coffee. They dismounted swiftly, Ethan positioning himself between Olivia and the entrance, his broad frame a barrier as the sedan idled at the curb before creeping past and vanishing around the corner. Olivia's breath came in shallow bursts, the diner's glow illuminating the tension etched on her face. The subtle lines around her eyes deepened by years of quiet endurance. "Who are they?" she whispered, her gloved hands trembling slightly as she adjusted her scarf. "The wool soft but insufficient against the night's bite. Could be anyone tied to the old guard," Ethan replied, scanning the lot with eyes honed by vigilance. He nodded toward the door. "Inside. We wait, then loop back to the safe house. Jax is en route with backup." The bell above the door jingled as they entered, the warmth enveloping them like an reluctant embrace, air thick with the sizzle of bacon on the grill, the murmur of truckers at the counter trading stories of hauls and heartaches. They slid into a vinyl booth by the window, the cracked seats sighing under their weight, menus sticky from forgotten spills. Olivia ordered black coffee, needing its bitter edge to ground her, while Ethan stuck to water, his fingers drumming a subtle rhythm on the table, code, perhaps, for the crew's unspoken signals. As they waited, the conversation turned inward, peeling back layers in the diner's hazy light. "Daniel, he was like you," she said softly, stirring her cup, the spoon clinking like a metronome against the porcelain. "Always honoring what he started. He promised Mia he'd teach her to ride a bike. Nothing fancy, just the backyard kind. Never got the chance." Her voice cracked, not from tears, but from the raw edge of unresolved loss, the way grief lingered like smoke after the flames died. Ethan's gaze softened, the steel in his eyes yielding to something warmer, forged in his own forge of regrets. He leaned forward, elbows on the formica, the faint scent of leather mingling with the coffee's aroma. "I get that. Lost my brother in the sands overseas, made a pact with him under the stars, watching flares light the sky like false dawns. Watch each other's backs," he said. "When the system called it collateral, I couldn't let it stand. Rode out, found the iron promise. We're not heroes in capes. We're the ones who keep the fire lit when the world's gone dark." He paused, glancing out the window where headlights swept by. Another car, or the same? The uncertainty hung heavy, a psychological tether pulling at their resolve. The diner's clock ticked toward midnight's echo, the new year now a day old, but feeling eternal in its revelations. Olivia pulled the copied pages from her coat pocket, spreading them on the table under the low-hanging lamp, shadows playing across Daniel's meticulous notes. Chemical manifests, inspector signatures. Victor's name leaped out again, a familial ghost Ethan couldn't outride. "My uncle. He wasn't always broken," Ethan admitted, tracing the faded ink. "War changed him, then the job. Pressures from above. City contracts promising jobs. But delivering shortcuts. Daniel must have pushed him, tried to pull him back." A flicker of ethical torment crossed his features. The dilemma of blood versus truth twisting like a knife. Loyalty to family or to the promise that bound him? The iron promise's oath demanded the latter, but the heart warred quietly. Outside, the rumble of multiple engines approached, low, synchronized, like thunder rolling in from the horizon. Jax pulled up first, his bike flanked by 3 others, rugged men in patched jackets, faces weathered by wind and wisdom, their presence a chosen family materializing from the night. They entered without fanfare, boots thudding softly, nodding to Ethan as they formed a loose perimeter around the booth. Jax, lean and sharp-eyed with a jaw set like granite, slid in opposite them. Sedans circled back twice. "We lost it in the alleys, but they're sniffing. What's the play?" Olivia met their gazes. Strangers yet allies in this fraying web of corruption. "We expose it. For the ones who can't speak, the workers, Daniel. No more buried truths." Her voice held a newfound steel, the moral fire kindling brighter. Justice not as vengeance, but as poetic reckoning. Ethan nodded, folding the pages with care. "We hit the source tomorrow. City Hall records, quiet. Crew splits, some on lookout, others digging." As they rose to leave, the diner's patrons barely glanced up, the world outside their bubble of quiet heroism. Ethan walked Olivia to his bike, the others mounting up in a convoy that hummed with purpose, the scent of revving engines filling the air, exhaust curling like vows sealed in smoke. They rode out in formation, weaving through the city's veins, the possible tale deterred by their numbers. Olivia's arms around Ethan felt less tentative now, a bridge across solitary roads. Back at the safe house, a nondescript warehouse on the industrial edge, its corrugated walls echoing with the ghosts of old repairs, the group gathered around a scarred wooden table under bare bulbs, maps unrolled, notes exchanged in hushed tones, the air thick with the tang of oil and instant coffee. Ethan outlined the plan. Infiltrate the archives at dawn, when guards rotated. Jax would handle diversions, pulling strings with old department contacts wary of the rot. Olivia contributed, her insights on Daniel's habits painting a clearer picture of the cover-up. Overtime logs faked, warnings ignored, a chain of silenced voices leading to the chief's office. But as the night deepened, doubt crept in like fog through the cracks. Ethan stepped outside for air, the cool breeze carrying the distant wail of a siren. Routine or warning? He lit a cigarette, the flame briefly illuminating the emblem on his jacket. Iron Promise, a stylized chain unbroken. Olivia joined him, her silhouette soft against the sodium lights. "This could break more than it mends," she said, voice laced with the psychological weight of the choice. "Mia, if it goes wrong." He exhaled slowly, smoke dissipating into the stars. "That's the ride. Promises aren't safe. They're sacred. We honor them, or we lose what makes us whole." Their eyes met, a silent pact forming. Redemption not just for the past, but for the family they were building, chosen and fierce. Inside, the crew continued, loyalty weaving their threads tighter. The sedan might lurk, but so did their resolve. actions silent yet seismic, hurtling toward a dawn where truth would roar. If this story is stirring something in you, hit that like button below. It helps spread these tales of quiet courage far and wide. Dawn broke over the city like a reluctant witness, its pale light filtering through the warehouse's grimy skylights, casting elongated bars of gold across the scarred table, where maps lay unfurled like battle plans, etched in ink and resolve. The air hung heavy with the scent of stale coffee and machine oil, the faint metallic tang from tools scattered on workbenches mingling with the low murmur of voices as the Iron Promise crew huddled in preparation. Ethan stood at the head, his broad shoulders squared under the leather jacket that creaked softly with each measured breath, outlining the infiltration with the precision of a man who'd navigated worse shadows than city bureaucracy. Jax flanked him, his sharp eyes scanning the group, 5 riders strong now, each a veteran of roads both literal and metaphorical, their faces etched with the quiet scars of loyalty, tested and unbroken. Olivia sat at the edge, her fingers tracing the edges of Daniel's copied notes, the paper crinkling under her touch like whispers from the grave. The night's reflections outside with Ethan had solidified something in her, a bridge from solitary grief to shared purpose, the weight of Mia's future pressing like an anchor against the tide of doubt. She wasn't a rider by nature, her world once confined to station houses and family dinners, but the fire that claimed Daniel had forged her anew, and now, in this makeshift war room, she felt the pull of the chosen family forming around her. "The archives open at 7, she said, her voice steady, in cutting through the hum. "I know the layout from Daniel's stories, back entrance by the loading dock, minimal cameras. We go in pairs, out before the shift change." Ethan nodded, his gaze meeting hers with a flicker of approval, the unspoken bond between them thickening like fog rolling in from the river. "Jax and I take point. You and Lena." He gestured to a compact woman in the crew, her ponytail tied back with a bandana, eyes fierce from years pulling shifts as a nurse in understaffed ERs. "Handle the copies, rest on perimeter." Lena, who'd joined the Promise after losing a brother to a botched hospital cover-up, offered Olivia a reassuring squeeze on the shoulder, her calloused hand warm and grounding. No words needed. This was the rhythm of redemption, actions speaking where promises had been broken. They moved out as the first rays pierced the horizon, engines firing in a staggered chorus that rumbled through the industrial sprawl like a heartbeat quickening. Olivia rode with Lena this time, the bike's vibration a steady thrum against her thighs, the wind whipping her scarf as they wove through awakening streets, delivery trucks groaning to life, steam rising from manhole covers like exhaled secrets. The city hall loomed ahead, a monolithic structure of grey stone and glass, its flags limp in the still air, embodying the institutional facade they aimed to crack. Ethan led the way to a shadowed alley behind, dismounting with fluid grace, his boots silent on the dew-slicked pavement. The group split seamlessly, a silent choreography born of trust, Jax jimmying the service door with a tool from his kit, the lock clicking open like a confession yielded under pressure. Inside, the corridors stretched dim and echoing, fluorescent lights humming overhead in a sterile buzz that clashed with the faint must of aging paper from the archives below. Olivia's pulse echoed the drip of a distant faucet, her senses heightened, the cool tile underfoot, the subtle creak of floorboards protesting their steps. They descended via a service stairwell, the air growing cooler, laced with the dry scent of dust and ink, until they reached the vaulted room, lined with towering shelves of files, shadows pooling in the corners like unspoken fears. Ethan and Jax peeled off to the restricted section, their flashlight beams slicing the gloom, while Olivia and Lena approached the public logs, hearts pounding in the quiet that amplified every rustle. Fingers flew over labels, Pulling volumes on warehouse permits and inspector reports, the leather bindings cool and heavy in Olivia's hands. She found it quickly, a thick dossier on the Apex site, stamped with dates that aligned too neatly with Daniel's warnings. Flipping pages under the desk lamp's hooded glow, her breath caught at the forged signatures. Memos buried deep, hinting at kickbacks funneled through shell companies. "Look," she whispered to Lena, sliding a document across, the chief's endorsement on a rushed approval, Victor Harlan's name scrawled below like a familial indictment. Lena's jaw set, her nurse's precision guiding the photocopier they'd smuggled in, its whir a tense undercurrent in the silence. But tension coiled tighter as footsteps echoed from the hall above, guard rotation earlier than anticipated. Ethan's voice crackled softly over the concealed earpiece Jax had rigged. "Company, stall if needed. We're close." Olivia's mind raced, ethical crossroads flashing. Expose now and risk capture, or pull back and let the rot fester. She thought of Mia, waking to an empty house, reciting school pledges about truth and justice that rang hollow without action. No, this was the promise Daniel couldn't keep, the one she'd honor in his stead. Lena nodded, her eyes mirroring the resolve, as they bundled the copies into a satchel, the weight a tangible defiance. Upstairs, Ethan and Jax moved like ghosts through the chief's antechamber, the door ajar revealing a desk cluttered with recent files. Jax's quick hands rifled drawers, unearthing an encrypted drive, digital echoes of the paper trail, logs tying current deals to the old fire's shadows. But as Ethan pocketed it, a shadow fell across the threshold, a uniformed figure, radio in hand, eyes widening in surprise. "What the—" The guard reached for his belt, but Ethan stepped forward, hands raised, voice low and commanding. "Easy. We're not here to fight, just truth." The man hesitated, recognition flickering, perhaps a face from old department whispers, or the weight of Ethan's unyielding stare, carrying the moral gravity of promises unbroken. Outside, the perimeter crew signaled clear, engines idling in the alley like patient guardians. The group reconvened swiftly, slipping out as the guard's radio crackled with a delayed alert, the door sealing behind them with a soft thud. They mounted up, the convoy peeling away in a low roar that blended with morning traffic, the satchel secure against Olivia's side. But as they crested the bridge over the river, the black sedan reappeared in the side mirror, closer now, aggressive, its horn blaring a warning shot through the haze. Ethan signaled a split, half the crew drawing the tail into a feint toward the highways, while he, Olivia, and Lena veered toward the safe house's back route. The bike surged, wind howling past, Olivia's arms locked around Lena's waist, the satchel a shield against her chest. Adrenaline surged, not fear, but the sharp clarity of purpose, the psychological edge where doubt yielded to determination. "They know we're close," Olivia shouted over the rush, the words whipping away but landing true in her mind. Ethan glanced back from his lead bike, his nod a vow. The iron promise didn't run. They rode through. At the warehouse, they regrouped under the watchful eyes of the crew, the drive plugged into a laptop on the table, files blooming across the screen like revelations in the light, corruption laid bare, chains of bribes linking developers to the chief, Daniel's death a deliberate spark to silence his probes. Ethan's face darkened at Victor's deeper involvement, pressured not just by debt, but by threats to family, a cycle Ethan had escaped only to face again. "Blood or not, he chose wrong," he said quietly to Olivia, the ethical wound raw but his resolve ironclad. "We end this. Press conference, anonymous drop. Let the light do the work." Olivia stood, the document spread before her like a map to redemption, Mia's face flashing in her thoughts, a daughter deserving a legacy of truth, not shadows. The crew murmured agreement, loyalty binding them tighter, a family chosen in the forge of quiet courage. Outside, the sedan had been shaken, but the hunt lingered, suspense coiling like smoke. Yet in that moment, as engines cooled and plans solidified, the promise pulsed stronger. Justice, not as thunder, but as the steady dawn breaking corruption's night. The road to reckoning stretched ahead, one turn from climax, where honor would claim its due. The midday sun hung high over the city, its rays slicing through the press conference room's tall windows like blades of unyielding light, illuminating the cluster of reporters and cameras that buzzed with anticipation. The air carried the faint hum of air conditioners, battling the winter chill outside, mingled with the sharp scent of fresh coffee from styrofoam cups lining the back tables. Olivia stood at the podium, her hands steady on its edges, the weight of the satchel, now emptied of its damning contents, replaced by the gravity of words long overdue. Beside her, Ethan loomed like a sentinel, his leather jacket a stark contrast to the suits and blazers, his presence a quiet anchor in the storm of flashing bulbs and murmured questions. The Iron Promise crew lingered at the room's periphery, unobtrusive shadows. Jax by the door, Lena near the windows, their eyes vigilant, a chosen family woven from threads of shared scars and unbreakable oaths. She'd barely slept, the warehouse night's revelations replaying like a relentless reel, the drive's files decrypting to reveal not just Victor's complicity, but a network of payoffs that stretched from the fire chief's office to city developers, all to bury the Apex warehouse's sins. Daniel's death wasn't accident or fate, it was a calculated spark to silence a man too honorable to look away. Olivia had stared at the screen until dawn, tears blurring the pixels, not for the man she'd lost, but for the justice he'd craved, now hers to claim. Ethan had sat with her through it, his silence a balm, sharing only, "We ride this to the end, for him, for us." Mia waited at home with a trusted neighbor, oblivious to the seismic shift, but Olivia carried her daughter's future like a shield, promises renewed in the quiet hours before the sun rose. The moderator, a wiry journalist with glasses perched on his nose, cleared his throat. "Mrs. Harlan, Ms. Reynolds, we're here because of your tip, these documents. They're explosive. Care to elaborate?" The room leaned in, notebooks poised, the click of pens echoing like loading chambers. Olivia drew a breath, the cool microphone brushing her lips, tasting of metal and resolve. 5 years ago, my husband, Daniel Reynolds, a firefighter with more heart than the department deserved, died in the Apex warehouse fire. We were told it was tragedy, faulty wiring, bad luck. But these files... She gestured to the projected slides behind her, redacted names glowing in stark white. Prove otherwise. Forged inspections, blocked exits, bribes to overlook dangers. Daniel uncovered it. He paid with his life. Her voice held steady, laced with the raw edge of grief transmuted to fire, the moral poetry of truth cutting through the room's skepticism. Gasps rippled, cameras whirring to life, but Olivia pressed on, detailing the chain. Victor Harlan's pressured signature, the chief's memos green-lighting shortcuts for condo gold, the workers' lives reduced to expedited footnotes. Ethan stepped forward then, his gravelly timbre cutting the tension like an engine's low idle. "I'm Ethan Harlan, Victor's nephew. This isn't family washing dirty, it's honor demanding clean. The Iron Promise, we're riders, vets, folks who've seen systems fail the innocent. We dug because promises don't expire. Daniel's oath was to protect. Ours is to see it through." His eyes swept the crowd, unblinking, the faint scent of leather and road dust wafting as he shifted, a sensory reminder of the roads that led here. No bravado, just the quiet force of a man who'd traded blood ties for chosen loyalty. Redemption etched in every line of his face. Questions erupted like sparks. "How did you obtain this?" Chief's response? But the crew's perimeter held, Jax's subtle nod to a planted ally feeding follow-ups that amplified the exposure. Outside, the black sedan had been spotted blocks away, circling futilely as news vans clogged the streets. The corruption's web snared in the light of day. Olivia fielded the barrage, with Ethan's steadying hand at her elbow, invisible to the cameras, but felt in her core. A bridge from pretense at a midnight party to partnership in the blaze of justice. The psychological weight lifted with each revelation. Suspense uncoiling into catharsis, the ethical dilemma of blood versus truth resolved not in violence, but in the poetic triumph of integrity. As the conference wound down, applause broke unexpectedly. A reporter standing, then others, the room's energy shifting from scrutiny to solidarity. Olivia stepped back, chest tight with the surge of vindication, tears pricking but held at bay. Ethan caught her eye, a faint smile cracking his stoic mask, the shared glance speaking volumes. The ride was over, but the bond endured. They slipped out a side door amid the chaos, the crew forming up like guardians, engines waiting in the lot below. The city sprawled beneath them, no longer a cage of shadows, but a canvas for legacies rebuilt. Back home that evening, as snow flurried softly against the windows, Olivia knelt by the fireplace, Mia curled beside her on the rug, the half-decorated tree twinkling with new ornaments. The news played muted on the TV, headlines scrolling, Fire Department Scandal Rocks City, Justice for Fallen Hero. Daniel's badge gleamed on the mantel, polished anew, a silent witness to the promise fulfilled. Mia looked up, her young face alight with questions. "Mom, the man on the bike, he's a hero too, right? Like Dad?" Olivia smiled, pulling her close, the warmth of the fire chasing the last chills. "More than that, sweetie. He's family, the kind we choose." Ethan had lingered outside, respecting the moment, but his bike's rumble idled in the driveway, a vow that roads led back, not away. The iron promise had scattered for now, but calls would come. Jax texting updates on arrests, Lena promising check-ins. Corruption crumbled under the weight of their quiet actions, the chief resigning by dusk, developers scrambling as audits loomed. Victor, reached in a haze of regret, had confessed in a recorded call, his voice breaking over the line, redemption's fragile thread, offered but not demanded. Night fell gentle, stars piercing the velvet sky like distant beacons. Olivia stepped onto the porch, Ethan rising from his lean against the railing, the air crisp with pine and exhaust. "It's done," she said softly, the words a release. He nodded, grey eyes reflecting the porch light. "Promise is kept. That's the legacy." No grand farewell, just a hand extended, then withdrawn, the space between them filled with unspoken futures. He mounted up, the engine's roar a farewell lullaby, fading into the dark as Olivia watched, heart full. In the days that followed, life stitched itself anew. Mia learning to ride a bike in the backyard under Ethan's occasional guidance, the crew becoming weekend fixtures, barbecues laced with stories of roads and rescues. Justice rolled out in waves, memorials for the lost workers, reforms in the department. Daniel's name etched in a plaza of heroes. Olivia found work consulting on safety protocols, her voice now heard where silence once reigned. Ethan rode on, but detours brought him back, the iron promises chain linking them all. What began in a shadowed corner at midnight's toll had forged a family from fragments, proving that in a world of broken vows, one act of quiet courage could mend the horizon. Honor roared eternal, a engine's hum against the silence of what might have been. Thanks for riding along on this journey of promises kept and quiet heroism. If these stories of redemption and chosen family resonate with you, hit that subscribe button and join us for more tales from the road, where every turn leads to truth.